Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, Tacitus today, and thank you for joining us audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about something that does the rounds fairly often, and it's been doing the rounds again through the media, about that Asian students are brighter than other students, brighter than white students, black students, Hispanic, and so on. This is the main sort of evidence, if you will, that's used to make this claim, or to assert its possibility, maybe is a better way of expressing it, is that the SAT scores in the senior high school graduation exam to university in the United States have Asians as a group and as an average, have Asians at the top. By Asians, I think they mean Chinese and Indian students. Have Asians at the top, and why all the other races, whites, blacks, Hispanics, and so on, coming further down the chain. I find this hard to accept. As I've mentioned, a million times in the videos I've done, I've done a huge amount of international travel, so I've been meeting around the world the best and the brightest in every continent, or at least the well-connected elites who've had access to all the best education, and I've been meeting them and doing business with them, and crunching numbers with them, and so on. And now, if there was this notable brightness in one part of the world but not in the other, or in one race but not from another one, then I would see that. I would have noticed it. It would have come across at some point. And again, given I've done business all over the world with every different race, I don't care who I'm doing business with. It never bothered me. And apart from that, I was employed to do a job, not to play some sort of fanciful racial politics or something. I wasn't a student activist or anything like that. I was there to do a job, and everyone's money was as good as anyone else's, and as the saying goes, the only color I saw was green, as in the greenback and the American currency. But I didn't see this brightness, and at times, given I might be on my own in certain places, I would have to deal with younger people who maybe weren't that long out of college, and some of them having done college or university in the West, the United States or wherever. And so I would see them, and sometimes they were picked to come into meetings, or because their English might be a bit better than someone else's, or the guy who went to America 20 years ago to do university, but hadn't really spoken that much English in the meantime. And so anyway, I do business with it, and I didn't notice the brightness there either. So whether it be people that had got local education but learned English, or they'd gone to the West to get a college degree, older people, younger people, I didn't see this cleverness. And so I did to some extent in Japan, I guess, but not outside of that. Certainly did not see it in India or China, or dealing with the Chinese diaspora, whether it be in Malaysia or Singapore or Taiwan or whatever. So I never saw this clear. Now, if it does exist, then maybe I'm just too dumb. Maybe I'm the dumbest fuck that ever walked the face of the earth, and I can't see or appreciate or understand their brilliance. But for certainly the many years, still doing the many years that I was doing that sort of travel, and dealing with that many people, then I didn't see the brightness. Now, when I went to white countries, when I was dealing with the American elites, for example, then not so much as time went on, when affirmative action was starting to kick in, but certainly in the earlier stages, I was very impressed by the American elites. Sharp, bright, on the ball. They knew their shit. And no, I'm someone who admires brightness and cleverness. I like it when I see it, and I admire it in any, it doesn't matter who it is in whatever form. It's something that I naturally admire, and wherever I see it. But I tended to see it primarily in the United States, or in white countries generally, but I rarely saw it outside of that. Did see it, but it was rare. So if the Asian students, again Chinese or Indians, are brighter, then it in no way displayed or was evident to me as I was going around. Now looking at it from the other way, Chinese and Indians coming to Australia or the West, Australia in this case, I'll talk about. Once the migration was picking up, then a higher proportion of job applicants and the like were coming in who were Chinese and Indian, and at the time I had no view that they were brighter or not brighter or anything like that. The idea of the SATs and showing all Asian students are brighter, that wasn't something that at that time was being bandied about. It is today and has been for, I don't know, 10 years or so, but it wasn't then. So when these Asians, Indians and Chinese were coming in, even if they'd come at a fairly young age and they spoke good English, as good as anyone else, or if they, the Indian elite, the Brahmins, they all spoke English, and they all had, and I was interviewing and hiring these people. Now, from a philosophical, chatty point of view, talking about abstract philosophical concepts, the Indians always impressed me. I did like talking to them about, the whether it be Socrates or fucking Plato or something. I did like talking to that. They were quite enjoyable to chat to in just in that sense. But they seemed to think, well, that was an indication of their stunning intellect, because they could talk about abstract philosophical theories. But it was useless in a work environment. It's all very well if you're just an elite swanning around in, with inherited wealth and vast money-making monopolies, where you don't have to lift a finger and the hoi polloi do all the work. That's and you can come across as being demigod-like in those sort of situations. But the reality was that from a work point of view, they were useless, or were certainly the ones I came across, even if they had the alleged triple PhDs. And as far as I could tell, they were just bribing their way to these degrees or being gifted them because of the prestigious social position their family held in the area or something like that. But they didn't seem to have done any work to earn these degrees. They hadn't earned them. They hadn't done the heavy lifting to earn these degrees. The other thing was there were some, I don't know, middle class, I guess you'd call them, Indians, and I found that they were excellent at swatting, as the Chinese are, and I'll come to that in a moment. But they're excellent at swatting, so they would sort of have a cramming swatting thing, which the Japanese do as well. And they would just, for a week, they would just cram swat the whole thing. And their memories are quite well exercised by the size of their alphabet and how it's used and the structure, the structure of words. In the West, we have a relationship. We understand a relationship between facts, and whereas the Asians tend to see a fact in isolation without its relationship to another matter. And I'll come back to that in a moment as well. But I found they're very good at swatting, but had this inability to see the relationship between the facts. So they could swat, which would give the impression, well, gee, this guy must be bright. He did okay in the exam. But they're just excellent crammers and swatters, not learners, which is two different things. So I didn't see that as much use. And pretty much all the programmers, certainly that I hired or had any response, the computer programmers, coders, either they completely faked their stuff and they couldn't cut a line of code to save their fucking lives. It was all bullshit. And they relied on social prestige of their class to be able to say, well, it doesn't matter whether I know it or not. I'm from a prestigious upper class and you've got no right to question me. What I do, I don't know. So the matter is moot. Therefore, I said, no. You're in a different country now, buddy. You're being paid to do a job and you've got to do it. And I found they had great difficulty accepting that, the Indians in particular. Chinese a little bit different. Now, coming to the Chinese, again, they're excellent swatters and crammers, as are the Japanese. And but that they, again, the Japanese not so much. The Japanese can seem to be able to work out a much greater relationship between facts and the relationship of one fact to another, and thus its relevance to an outcome. The Chinese not so much. maybe they'll develop this over time, but they have a strange attitude to exactitude. And I've given this example before. I was talking to some Japanese people about this deal, and I'll just simplify it a little bit. But we'll say that the size of the deal was $100, and so they asked the question, well, how much is it? I said, about $100. This is because in the West we do this for budgetary purposes. I need about $100, and then the final price was, once you get down to the precise detail and you're putting the writing, it came to $99.99. So 1 cent shy of $100. Now in the West, you don't even consider that. Fine, that's within the realms of what you said. But to the Chinese, they struggle with this. Oh, you say 100 and now $99.99. Why difference? Why you tell me 100 when it's not 100? Not 100. You tell, and this you have to try and explain, and they stare blankly at you. Got no idea what you're talking about. Why could you not precisely say what it was? So then you have to try and explain, well, you hadn't precisely said what it was you wanted. You'd said that you wanted something in the area of this. So we hadn't precisely decided on a product and the cost of that product plus installation plus delivery. We hadn't got to that level of mathematics at that time because we're in preliminary discussions. So we have to give you an approximate price. And then that price becomes firm once we decide exactly how we're moving forward. Oh no, you say 100, you say 100. Why you not tell it? And so they want to use this as some sort of a stick to not so much beat you over the head with, but say, you've tried to deceive us. We've caught you out. You morally bereft motherfucker. And they just can't seem to grasp it. That's a very simple explanation, but it shows the relationship between facts and the practical reality of what you're doing. And so I found, whereas they're good on memorizing fact and very excellent on cramming, much better than I could ever be, they're not so good at understanding what they're doing. And actually understanding what they're doing is close to irrelevant. They're memorizing it. And if you look at the size of the Japanese kanji character set, or indeed the Chinese alphabet, and their combination of the pictorial and the graphic and then the alphabetical, it's a huge character set, hundreds of characters, and that's a requirement to memorize that. So when your brain's being exercised in that breadth of memorization, then you're able, I think it exercises the capacity for memorizing, but without knowing what anything means. And frequently across, certainly Chinese I was doing business with and employing, they just couldn't reconcile two facts and understand the relationship between. I kind of found this constantly again and again, which gave them a rather, in my view at least, gave them a rather infantile perception of reality, an infantile perception of the practical sort of activity that we were engaged in. And I found I had to slow down and explain, as I would to a young child, the relationship between the two. They would remember the facts. And I remember giving one discussion. We gave I think it was a technical manual to one of the Chinese employees of this Chinese company. And then I was only a couple of days. It was quite a decent sized manual. A couple of days later, we came back for a meeting, and he was at the meeting, and he must have read the whole thing. He must have memorized just about fucking all of it, which itself was an impressive act. I don't take anything away with it. That is impressive. I couldn't do that. But he seemed to understand none of it. And so he would regurgitate a fact, and they'd say, well, no, that doesn't apply here because of such and such. And then he just sort of stare blankly and have no idea. And because of their sort of cultural predisposition, they assume that an explanation has a 50% chance of being a deception. So they'll try and bring another fact in to relate to the first fact, and that'll then nail it and lock it into position to determine whether or not they're being deceived. And they have very, very much have this attitude, which again prejudices their ability to think beyond a fact and think beyond its relationship to another fact. So I never saw it. I don't doubt the capacity to do well in exams. I've seen it in Japan as well. Some of the cramming schools and so on they've got there before exam time. And some of the ability to memorize and cram is very impressive. I've mentioned this one before as well. When going into we were once so we're in some like Japanese bar or nightclub, whatever it was, something like that, and they've got a Japanese guy who's doing the songs of the Beatles, and he's got, I don't know, a set of 10 songs or something like that. And he did them so well, every sound, every word, even capturing, the North English country accent in pronunciation of some of the words in the song. And he did, but I noticed watching, because I play the guitar and the piano, and I noticed watching him that he wasn't forming the proper guitar chords. He'd actually found a position on the fretboard to create the exact sound that is in the music, even though it was not a proper chord shape. So without actually learning the discipline of the chords, he'd found a way of making the sounds the same and remembering every one of those positions across 10 songs. So we could be talking about many hundreds of chord positions across the songs. And then he was he created these 10 songs, and I just assumed that a guy who did that must speak English. So I went to congratulate him on his wow, you speak English really well. The guy actually couldn't speak a fucking word of English, not one word. He remembered all of the song, and he just recreated the sounds. That's all he'd done. But he memorized all the sounds involved in those 10 songs, and then can just deliver them off the stage very convincingly. That's just an illustration of the extent of memorizing and cramming. And I was like, wow. No matter how undisciplined it was, in the sense of not the chord shapes and not understanding the words, no matter how undisciplined it was, the guy had managed to recreate that. And that is impressive, even though he didn't have a clue what he was saying or what he was doing. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.